Welcome to the She Speaks to Inspire podcast. I'm your host, Julia Kraft, your authentic expression mentor and public speaking coach. She Speaks to Inspire is an empowering public speaking podcast for women with public speaking fear. Unlike other podcasts on public speaking, She Speaks to Inspire not only gives you tips to be a confident communicator under pressure, but also helps you regulate your nervous system for less anxiety, learn lifestyle practices to reduce burnout and overwhelm, and reconnect with your feminine leadership presence for more authenticity and comfort in your skin. I believe it's the quiet ones, especially the quiet women, who have the most important ideas. I believe the world really does need your voice. So let's dive in. Welcome back to the She Speaks to Inspire podcast. I'm your host, Julia Kraft. I'm really excited about this episode about how to get enough air, and why it's so hard to get enough air, why we breathe so shallowly when we're nervous, and how to relax so that you can breathe comfortably. I've been getting so many notes and messages from women about the podcast. It's really heartwarming to know that my message is reaching so many women and making a difference in their lives. So if you are getting value out of this podcast, make sure to rate this episode and review so that other women can get this message as well. It's a really common symptom that I hear from women that experience public speaking fear and nerves, that they aren't getting enough air, that it's difficult to breathe, it's uncomfortable to breathe, that they're out of breath, their voice goes raspy or they're gasping for air. If they finish and they feel like they just ran a race, and they're gulping down breaths to come back to homeostasis. This is a really common challenge. If you experience it, no, it's not just you. And it actually makes a lot of sense when you understand why we get nervous around public speaking and how the body responds to nervousness. Let's start with some ABCs of breathing. Breathing is an expression of the central nervous system. Now, what do I mean by that? Breathing is a remarkable thing that happens usually unconsciously in our body, just like our heartbeat is remarkable. And our heartbeat is also responding to our nervous system. When you breathe in, you're taking in that fresh oxygenated air into your lungs. It's moving into your blood system, right? And then when you exhale, that stale, used up oxygen is moving out of your body as carbon dioxide. Now, how breathing works is that when you breathe in, the intercostal muscles around your rib cage pull your ribs apart and widen them to create a vacuum that draws the air into the lungs. And this air that comes in displaces the organs in the belly. That's why we say breathing into the belly. No, you can't breathe into your belly. You breathe into your lungs. But when you breathe in, the air coming into your lungs presses on the diaphragm, which is right underneath the lungs, and the diaphragm presses into the organs like the stomach and the intestines and everything, and then your belly goes outwards, and that's how you know you're getting a deep breath that's filling up most of your lungs. When we breathe shallowly, we're usually breathing into our chest. And that's often because there's tension in the abdominal muscles or tension in the diaphragm, which is the muscle at the base of the rib cage that's underneath of the lungs, in between the lungs and the abdominal cavity. Why do we have tension in the diaphragm or the abdominals? Well, that's usually because of nerves, right? The freeze response tightens us up, and it's safer to be tight, rigid, holding on until there's a moment of safety. some of us never get to that moment of safety. That's a whole nother topic for another episode about trauma. So that's the inhale. When we exhale, all of that muscular energy in the intercostal muscles that's pulling the rib cage apart and pulling the diaphragm down disengages. And the rib cage drops back to its normal resting place. The diaphragm drops back or lifts up really to its natural resting place, which is, it looks like an umbrella in the middle of our torso when it's relaxed. And all of this relaxation of the muscles sends the air in the lungs up and out through the esophagus and the mouth or the nose. That's the anatomy of breathing. In a lot of ways, it's very simple, but then it's actually very complicated in how it interacts with our emotions, our mental state, and our physiology. Think of a baby, like a newborn baby laying on its back in a beautiful bassinet, sleeping. Is that baby breathing into its belly or its chest? Is its chest moving when it breathes, or is its belly moving as it breathes? If you said the belly, you're totally right. Babies don't breathe in their chest. They have big, soft bellies, and their bellies move up and down naturally with their breathing. They're in a state of deep relaxation. Their parasympathetic nervous system is activated, and it's generally not until later in life that we start to have the adrenaline response, cortisol response in our body, and our breathing starts to get tighter and more shallow. How do you breathe when you're nervous and anxious? Well, if you're anything like me or the other women that I work with, you probably start to breathe more quickly and more shallowly when you're nervous. Or you might hold your breath entirely, a tightness in your throat, a gripping in the belly. It's hard to get a breath in, and your voice might start to crackle because you don't have a lot of support, or you don't have a lot of volume because you don't have a lot of breath. And it's almost like you're always out of breath. It's uncomfortable. A lot of times this is because you might be speaking fast, trying to get your speaking over with, trying to get through it as fast as you can. Or maybe you can't even control your pace because the nervousness is just taking over and making you speak fast. This means that you're out of pace with yourself. And I have another podcast episode about speaking fast, so you can listen to that one. It's like a sprint, right? I used to run in high school. I loved to run, and I was really good at the short races, like 100 meters, 200 meters, even 400 meters. These sprints, you go hard and fast for a short period of time, and then afterwards, you're huffing and puffing, and it takes a while for both your breathing and your heart rate to calm down. If you approach speaking like a sprint, you'll be out of breath. Your heart will be racing. What if you approached your speaking engagement like a marathon? What would you do differently? A marathon. What are marathon runners like after a race? Are they huffing and puffing? No. By the time that they're getting towards the end of the race, they've been going for so long, they've gotten into this rhythm, right? Their breathing needs to be deep and rhythmic in order to manage the intensity of that long haul of a run. Whether your speaking moment is 5 minutes or 8 hours, whatever it is, I do recommend thinking of it more like a marathon without the sense of competition or, trying to win the race. The sense of it being a long haul journey. And you're going to pace yourself. You're going to pay attention to each moment and make sure to take good care of yourself so you can make it to the finish line. With a sprint, we pretty much already know that we're going to make it to the finish line, right? Okay, I'll make it. It's not that far, right? Am I going to win? I don't know. Then it becomes that's about speed, right? But with a marathon, sometimes you don't make it to the finish line because you don't have the stamina. because you didn't manage your energy well enough, because you didn't have the right mindset to manage your state of being along the journey. Another metaphor that might be helpful is, what if your speaking's like a yoga class? I'm a yoga chick, so go with me here. If you're into yoga, go with me. A yoga class, you get into a rhythm, similar like a marathon, right? You get into a rhythm of your breathing, a rhythm of your heart rate. There might be some rise and fall when you're doing those more difficult sequences, but ultimately you're pretty steady, right? Pretty steady, and you get into this zone, right? That's what I want for you with your speaking. And this is the kind of cadence that you can start to find with your breathing for speaking. You're in the zone, you're taking slow, steady breaths. It's actually sort of a relaxing experience. Oh, I'm taking deeper breaths than I have all day while I'm doing this speaking engagement. Can you imagine that? How are you going to get there? Well, you hear me talk about speaker warm-up routines all the time if you've been listening to the podcast. So if you haven't already watched my masterclass, make sure to go to speaktoinspire.com, watch the masterclass, and learn more about nervous system regulation and speaker warm-up routines. But what I want to highlight on this episode is that your breath is going to respond to the state of your nervous system. If your nervous system's in panic, then your breath is going to respond to that. If your nervous system is at ease, your breath is going to express that. Some really simple ways that you can start to work with your nervous system when you feel that tightness come over you and your breath gets shallow, or when you feel that fast-paced sprint kind of feeling come over you. Here's some simple things that you can do. Here, try this with me. Just place your hand on the side of your neck, palm to the skin of your neck. My hands on my neck right underneath of my ear, pressing onto that soft, very vulnerable spot of my neck. This is where your vagus nerve runs. The vagus nerve is one of the most powerful nerves to affect the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of your nervous system that signals you to relax. So what does it feel like to receive that touch? Does it calm you? Does it slow you down? You can try the other side. Sometimes women like just placing their hands there. Sometimes it's more nourishing, more relaxing to move your hands along this spot like a sweep or a swipe along the skin of the vagus nerve. So whatever feels relaxing to you, you'll feel it. I can feel it as I'm doing it with you now. There's a natural sigh of relief that will often come from taking a moment to do this. Another really simple way to work with your nervous system is to lean forward a little bit and place your hands on your back, on your mid-back, right where your adrenal glands are. Do you know where those are? They're right at the base of your rib cage, actually right where your diaphragm connects to your rib cage and your spine. And they're right underneath of those floating ribs in the back. If you know what I mean, place your hands there, lean forward, round forward a little bit, and take some deeper breaths into the spot where you feel your hands. This is again where your adrenal glands are, and of course where your adrenaline comes from. So this is an area that's really common to get tight when we're getting adrenalized and stressed and there's cortisol pumping into our body, right? So one of the ways to calm that down is to settle this part of your body with a feeling of touch. You can imagine, what would it be like to receive that kind of support from someone I love or I believe really supports me? So maybe that's your husband or your friend or your mother or your guardian angel, whatever it is. Imagine they have their hands right on your adrenal glands and you are supported. You don't have to work so hard, strain so much. You're going to let yourself settle. And as you release your hands from your back, take a breath. Notice the impact of that. How are you different? There's a lot of breathing techniques for speaking that will help you not only feel more relaxed, but also have more resonant voice, have a voice that fills the room more and sounds more confident and authoritative. There's so many techniques that I could teach you. Really, it's beyond the scope of this podcast. So again, if you're interested in diving into this deeper, consider signing up for the Fully Expressed program. It would be my pleasure to support you on this journey. But I hope today's episode was helpful to get you started with understanding what's happening in your body with your breathing, with your nervous system, and how to start relaxing on purpose when you need it. Thanks for listening. This has been She Speaks to Inspire with Julia Kraft, your authentic expression mentor and public speaking coach. I'm so glad you joined me. And I hope you got so much out of this episode. If you want to learn more about Speak to Inspire training programs and get inspired, head over to speaktoinspire.com or follow us on Instagram at She Speaks to Inspire. Never forget, the world needs your voice, and it's time for you to speak to inspire. See you in the next episode.